Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church in Idaho Falls. I am Annette Lovell and I am the worship associate this morning, bringing the service to you today from our sanctuary with our tech and media support, Vic Allen. We welcome you whether this is your first time finding us online or if you've been a longtime member or friend. We welcome you if you come with troubles or concerns and you were trying to find answers to soothe your soul. We welcome you if you are seeking a new way of thought or direction. We welcome you to find community with us, even without getting together in person still. We welcome you even if you joined us today because you didn't have anything else better to do and you wanted to see what the UUs were up to. Whatever your reasons, we welcome you. We always like to start our time together with a few announcements. It's been a year and a half, so hopefully most of you know the drill on our online presence. So first of all, sign into the chat box so that we can see who is joining us. And if you want to share a joy and concern later in the service, please start typing that in now so we can collect them and we'll use them a little bit later. We are still having a coffee hour immediately after the service, but we are going to have a live, in-person, rescheduled picnic today outside in the Peace Garden at 12:30. It's a beautiful day. The skies are blue, so come out and join. It'll be a good abilities to see everybody. Bring your own lunch, drinks, silverware, and of course, a chair. The women's group is gathering indoors here at the church Friday, October 1st at 5:30. Bring food or beverage if you would like to share, and masks will be optional for those that are vaccinated. And of course, we are still running a functioning church and a ministry, and we depend on your financial generosity. I encourage you to find time to visit our website, where you can find the Give button in the upper right-hand corner and pay via PayPal, or write a check and drop it to our P.O. Box 50376, Idaho Falls, 83405. Of course, any and all monetary donations are very gratefully accepted and received. And lastly, our sermon today that I am sharing was written by UU minister Linda Whittenberg. It has been modified and adapted, but the majority of the words and ideas are hers. I want to make sure she gets credit. So let us now prepare for worship with a few moments to settle in, calm our minds and our breathing. Let us breathe deeply together, and I will ring the peace bowl 3 times. We will begin. covenant together as a group and reiterate to ourselves certain principal ideas every week. Please recite with me this congregation's covenant, and then we will light our chalice. Love is the spirit of this community, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And if you have a chalice at home or a candle, I invite you to light this now. As I share the words from Julian Lepp, she says, "We seek our place in the world and the answers to our heart's deep questions. As we seek, may our hearts be open to unexpected answers. May the light of our chalice remind us that this is a community of warmth, of wisdom, and the welcoming of multiple truths." And our lovely Jessica has been ill and has lost her voice temporarily, so our opening hymn is page 38, Morning Has Broken, but it's a little bit older version, so please sing along.
Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet the rain's snowfall, sunlit from heaven, like the first dew fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung in completeness where God's feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one light, Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day.
Our opening words are a poem by Mary Oliver that I think all of us are very familiar with. It's called The Summer Day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass. The one who is eating sugar in my hand. Who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down. Who is gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention. How to fall down into the grass. How to kneel down into the grass. How to be idle and blessed. And how to stroll and through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't
Today's
everything
Time for All
die
Ages.
last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?
Today's Time for All Ages is Fritz Tries Again by Rosemary Wells, found in Timothy's Tales from Hilltop School. Read by Elizabeth Coyote, Director of Lifespan Faith Development. Fritz Tries Again. On Monday morning, Mr. Wagweed said, It's Science Fair week, boys and girls. Saturday morning, prizes will go to the best projects. I'm going to win. I'm going to build a rocket ship, shouted Claude. I am going to grow a moss garden, said Yoko. Timothy wanted to collect seashells. Fritz raised his hand. What are you going to do, Fritz? Asked Mr. Wagweed. Fritz drew a diagram on the blackboard. Doris guessed it was an automatic bird feeder. Charles guessed a train. Mr. Wagweed couldn't guess at all. It's a superconducting super collider, said Fritz. But Fritz, said Mr. Wagweed, there is only one of those in the world, and it wasn't even finished. It is a 54-mile tunnel shaped like a circle. It cost $11 billion to build. No one knows if it would have worked. Well, there is going to be a second one right here at Hilltop School, said Fritz, and this one will work. Claude went home to build his rocket ship. Timothy went to collect his seashells. Yoko took off to find different mosses. Fritz looked in the cupboard. He found a giant pack of toilet paper rolls. Upstairs in his bedroom, he unrolled every one. Soon the floor and bed and chair were covered with toilet paper. But Fritz had 12 cardboard tubes. I need more, said Fritz to himself. I am going to the store. What do we need? Called Fritz's dad. Look in the cupboard, dear, answered Fritz's mama. We are out of toilet paper, muttered Fritz's dad. Soon Fritz's dad came back from the store with 2 12-packs of toilet paper. Fritz waited for his father to go out and start the lawnmower. Then he took both 12-packs into his room and unrolled them all. Now I have lots and lots of tubes, said Fritz. Fritz decided to glue the tubes into a great big circle. Dinner time, called Fritz's mother. What are you making up there, son? Asked Fritz's dad. A superconducting super collider, said Fritz. What's that, dear? Asked Fritz's mother. You shoot particles at it at extremely high speeds around a tunnel, said Fritz. They go so fast that the molecules change. When they stop, they have changed into something else. What are they going to start out as? Asked Fritz's mother. Marbles, said Fritz. And what will they turn into? Asked Fritz's father. I don't know yet. Probably bubble pops, said Fritz. Tuesday morning, Mr. Wagweed asked how the science fair projects were coming along. Doris told everybody about her cloud chart. Nora was busy collecting bird eggshells. Charles was arranging objects on a how heavy is it scale. Fritz was having trouble. He put his marbles into his dragon slayer slingshot, but the marbles would not shoot around the tunnel. Are you sure you don't want to try something else instead? Asked Mr. Wagweed. Tonight I will try shooting bath beads, said Fritz. But the bath beads did not work. How about an easier project, son? Said Fritz's dad. I am going to make my superconducting super collider work, said Fritz. Wednesday night he tried shooting chewing gum balls, but the chewing gum balls didn't go any faster. Thursday, Fritz tried the pop pearls from his mama's necklace. Nothing went fast enough to change it into something else. The toilet roll tunnel began to sag. Fritz's mother shook her head. You could imitate bird calls on your tin whistle, she suggested. Fritz duct taped his tunnel and hung it from the ceiling. I'm going to try frozen peas, said Fritz. Outside, please, said Fritz's mother. Friday afternoon everyone was very excited. Saturday morning was the science fair. Who would win the prizes? Everyone in Mr. Wagweed's class brought in a project. Grace's pansy seeds had begun to sprout in their see-through flower pots. One Frank had brought in a can of motor oil. The other Frank had a jar of water. They poured both into a blender. See, said the Franks, you could shake it all day, but it won't mix. How about you, Fritz? Asked Mr. Wagweed. But Fritz's superconducting super collider had fallen apart in the classroom. He tried a bigger elastic band in the dragon slayer slingshot. Nothing worked. Fritz did not want to cry, but he did. Mr. Wagweed took Fritz next door into the chemistry lab. Now Claude will win with his rocket ship, sobbed Fritz, and I won't have anything in the fair at all. Let's look at it another way, said Mr. Wagweed. Even the $11 billion superconducting super collider doesn't work. I guess not, said Fritz, blowing his nose. You did not give up, Fritz. You tried and tried. You asked many questions, said Mr. Wagweed. That is what makes a good scientist." "Really?" asked Fritz. "Really," said Mr. Wagweed. "Then a good scientist thinks of other questions and tries something else. Now, why don't you go home and do an experiment with an egg timer and an ice cube?" Fritz hummed the whole way home on the school bus, but he did not want to make anything with an egg timer and an ice cube. He had other ideas. When no one was looking, Fritz went down to the basement. In the corner was an old popcorn popper. Fritz brought it upstairs to his room. He put in new batteries. He poured in a whole jar of popcorn. What do you think he's doing now? What questions has he been asking? Fritz found a sack of flour in the kitchen cupboard. Until supper time, he shredded toilet paper into little bits and mixed them in a bucket with flour and water. He made a perfect cone around the popcorn popper and painted it green. "That smells like boat paint," said Fritz's father. "Oh, Fritz," said Fritz's mother, "what have you got in your room?" "You'll find out soon," said Fritz. The next day, Claude launched his space rocket. "Wow!" yelled the class. Nora had found 56 bird eggshells. "Wow!" said the class. "Look at all those seashells," said Mr. Wagweed to Timothy. Fritz waited for everyone else to finish. Then he wheeled in his project. "What is it?" said Mr. Wagweed. Fritz just smiled. Then he pushed the switch under the big green cone. The cone hummed and sputtered. Suddenly it began to pop popcorn. "Why, it's a popcorn volcano," said Mr. Wagweed. It popped corn as high as the ceiling and as far as the walls. It kept on popping while Mr. Wagweed handed out the awards. Claude won the space medal. Nora won the wildlife cup. Yoko won the botany trophy. Timothy got the oceanography prize. And Fritz took home a big blue ribbon with "Hilltop Never Give Up Scientist of the Year" written in gold letters. The end.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So it's now time to share our joys and concerns with each other, that we may connect together, especially at this time when we're not together in person very often. We do not have anything in our emails that were sent earlier, but I have a personal joy. Both of my children were able to come up and spend yesterday with me, and it's the first time my son has been with me or in my home for 2 years. So it was especially lovely. I want to light that wonderful candle of joy. Second joy is he brought his new Tesla and I got to drive it, and man, is it amazing. I love speed and it was fast. So yay for Tesla. Those are my 2 joys. And Anita Carpenter is back home and doing better. She says, "I am thankful for my UU community here in Idaho Falls, and thank you so much to the care community for all the help they have given her recently." So we'll light a candle for Anita. And Vic would like a candle lit.
Actually have 2 that I'd like to mention. The first one, just a candle of joy for our care team, who's done such a remarkable job through these very trying times. Excuse me. Stay on top of that to help everybody that's needed help. My second is both a joy and a concern, and that's for Dr. Alan Braid, the Texas doctor who's challenging the Texas abortion law. A joy that somebody had the fortitude to challenge that law, and a concern for his and his family's well-being.
Absolutely. And are there any others that have? I don't see anything else in the chat box, so we will light one more candle for those joys, those concerns, or those sorrows that we choose not to share at this time. Thank you. So I love to watch birds of prey. Hawks, owls, eagles. I have hawks and owls in my trees in my front yard, and I see eagles and ospreys everywhere along the Snake River. My husband and I walk along the river, or better yet, last week, we were floating the South Fork, and we watched the eagles taking off from the trees, circling for fish, for the pure love of being in the air. The birds we watched look like they are riding the wind currents for the pure bliss of diving and soaring. Now, as far as we know, no hawk questions why they exist, nor do eagles wonder where they come from. We humans, however, are created differently. We are designed with what Einstein calls a holy curiosity. Instinctively, children know that questions are the key which opens them to life, as Elizabeth briefly touched on in her children's story. One afternoon in autumn, a father and son were out walking in the park. The leaves were turning and beginning to fall. The sky was bright and blue and the air crisp, about like today. For a long stretch, the two walked together in silence, and finally the boy piped up and asked his father, "Daddy, why do some leaves turn yellow and some red and some brown before they die?" "Well, gee, son," the father responded, "I haven't the faintest idea." They walked on. The child stopped and tugged on his father's arm again and says, "Daddy, can dogs see in color?" "Beats me," said the father. "Look, Daddy, there's the moon. Some days you can see it during the day and other days you can't. Why is that, Dad?" "Well, to tell you the truth, I really don't know." "Dad, do cows go to heaven?" And so it went, the two walking together, the boy asking endless questions that his father couldn't answer, into the afternoon. Finally, they turned towards home, at which point the little boy said, "I sure do ask a lot of questions, don't I, Dad?" And the father said, Yes, you do. But that's just fine. After all, if you didn't ask your dad questions, how would you learn anything?" Well, even as adults, we might like to have someone whose hand we could hold on to and we could turn to with all of our questions. But life offers no such luxury. At least it didn't before Siri and Alexa, but that's a whole different sermon. So UU minister, Linda Whittenberg, who wrote this sermon, says, "The questions we ask are as much a part of the mystery as anything else within creation. They come in the middle of crisis, in the dark of night, or when we're preparing dinner or shoveling snow, or, as with Mary Oliver, questions about who made the world came while scrutinizing a grasshopper on a stroll through a field on a summer day." A monk once asked his master, "All these mountains and rivers, where do they come from?" The master responded, "Where does your question come from? Where do all questions come from?" A previous United Nations leader, Dag Hammarskjöld, wrote in his journal, "I don't know who or what put the question. I don't know when it was put. I don't even remember answering. But at some moment I did answer yes to someone or something, and from that hour I was certain that existence is meaningful. There is something of sacred origins about the questions themselves." So being able to ask the right questions is important, even essential. You may remember the legend of the Fisher King, which was written by T.S. Eliot in the poem The Wasteland. The Fisher King rules the kingdom where Percival visits in search of the Holy Grail. The king, who is impotent and lame, is unable to bring life to the kingdom, and as a result, everything is dried up and has gone to waste. The land lies barren. Humans and animals of the kingdom cannot reproduce. The Fisher King spends all of his days just amusing himself and fishing. When Percival is visiting the castle, he notices a young woman carrying a cup which radiates great light. The knight is consumed with curiosity about what he has seen, but he's too polite to ask about it. Well, not asking, as it turns out, was his greatest mistake. For the spell that covers the king's kingdom could only be broken if a hero were to ask one question: who does the Grail serve? By failing to ask the right question, he misses the opportunity to restore life. The story illustrates the power of the right question. Questions can have great power to unlock the truth or to move our lives forward, to help us heal, to lift us out of darkness. Questions like, has my drinking become a problem? What is this restlessness I always feel? What is it I really need to be happy? These are important, essential questions. Edwin Friedman, an author and a psychoanalyst, was working with a minister and his wife in a counseling session. In the space of about 45 minutes or so, Friedman dealt with one of the central issues in their marriage, which was his overworking and her anger and feelings of abandonment because of that. What was most impressive about the session was that Friedman did almost nothing but ask strategic questions. Rather than asking something obvious like, why do you feel like you must work so many hours? He asked questions like, what was your father like? How did your mother feel about him working long hours? Who made all the decisions in your family? And so forth. Soon, the truth emerged and the patterns that dominated their lives started to present themselves. The husband could see that he was playing out the marriage of his parents. The wife could see that she was responding out of patterns that she had learned through her family. Friedman didn't give the couple any great advice or direction. Clearly, he trusted that these two intelligent people had within them all they needed to free themselves if the right questions were answered. Questions can be risky, though. Once we ask certain questions, we can never turn back again to the way things were before. To a large extent, what we refer to as midlife crisis occurs because certain questions push themselves into our consciousness. Is what I am doing what I want to do for the rest of my life? Is this all there is? What happens when I die? And so forth. Socrates, the man who is given credit for creating European philosophy, walked the street of Athens, gathering the young and educated about him, luring them into nooks of temple porticos and answering their questions with another one. One thing only I know, he said, and that is that I know nothing. This was the starting point of his philosophy. There is no real philosophy, Socrates believed, until the mind turns round and examines itself. It was his questions about government that led to his doom. He asked, is it not shameful that human people should be ruled by orators who go ringing on in long harangues, like pots which when struck continue to sound till a hand is put upon them? He asked, how can a society be saved or be strong except it be led by its wisest citizens? These were fatal questions, as it turned out. Socrates was declared the corrupter of youth who turned young men against the gods of their fathers. He paid the price for his questioning spirit with hemlock. Plato wrote, such was the end of our friend, whom I may truly call the wisest, the justest, the best of all men who I have ever known. 300 years after Socrates came another great teacher who skillfully used questions to teach and probe his followers. There are many questions attributed to Jesus of Nazareth. Whether they are historically accurate or not, we do not know, but they remain a powerful part of the tradition that has been handed down about his ministry. Questions like, What do you seek? Do you want to be healed? Who do you say that I am? Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I tell you? Why are you afraid? Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye and do not see the beam in your own eye? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to the span of your life? These questions Jesus asked, could be dangerous questions. They transformed lives. They separated people from their families and traditions. They challenged the ruling powers of religion and state. And ultimately, it cost Jesus and many of his followers their lives. The religious journey is made up of questions, and the religious life is lived in response to those questions. Questions like, who am I? Where am I going? What is the purpose of my life? These are religious questions. One thing that sets humans apart from other creatures, at least as far as we know, is that we must deal with the mystery of being alive, even while we are confronted with the mystery of our own death. Our questions and our religious responses growed out of that paradox. The root of the word religion is to bind together. So how we respond to these ultimate questions binds the pieces of our lives together. These questions bind us to a community of people who ask similar questions. It was coming to the awareness that there was never going to be any book or institution or person who could answer those ultimate questions that probably brought most of us to Unitarian Universalism. For me, joining was an act that represented taking responsibility for my own spiritual journey, looking for my own answers, trusting my own instincts and my own intelligence to guide me to the right questions. And that joining, that signing of the book, which it took me years to do, thank you, Marilyn Watts, represented my willingness to join a community of discovery where I would not be alone in the search. Reverend Whittenberg continues, to a large degree, the questions religion asks are the same. What can I trust? How can I find meaning? What is the meaning of death? How shall I live? What shall I believe about the holy, call it God, goddess, or the infinite? The starting place of religions is similar, but the method of responding and the place of arrival are very different. According to many religions, it is important to answer these questions correctly. Forrest Church, UU minister and author, compared the response to some to a game of double jeopardy in which everything hinges on getting the right answer. He calls it game show theology. We Unitarian Universalists don't put as much emphasis on the right answer. We may be able to discern meaning in our lives, but far be it for us to say we know the meaning of life. And yet that doesn't inhibit us from conjecturing about the meaning of life. At times, you have been ridiculed for not having the answers. You know that old joke that the UU church is the one with the question mark on the steeple? Well, but we do have answers. We just don't claim to have the answer, the only answer. We accept that revelation is continuous, thus our answers are always open for revision. We believe attempts to make some kind of algebraic equation out of truth are foolhardy because truth defies explanation and formulation alone. New questions arise that make yesterday's answers obsolete. We outgrow answers just the way a kindergartner might outgrow a parka. We move into larger and larger understandings of how the world operates. The way we answer the question, who am I, a year ago or 5 years ago, does not fit today. I don't think for any of us. The truths that we thought we knew are shaken in the face of existential realities. UU minister Bryce Marshall shared a veteran story in a book he wrote called The Holy Curiosity. It was about a young soldier who found himself in the front lines of Korea commanding a tank where he came from in Kentucky, he didn't even know how to drive a car. He believed in the rightness of the Korean War, that the war was essentially about an immoral aggressor nation being prevented from aggressive acts by the principled United Nations. He believed that. One day he received the report that there was an enemy soldier lying on the crest of a hill, and without thought, he jumped in his tank, he lined up, and he fired around in the indicated direction. He had assumed the first round would scare the enemy soldier, who would run for cover. Instead, he scored a direct hit on his first shot ever in combat. While everyone else was celebrating his great hit, the soldier felt only horror. He says it was like sleepwalking towards a moment of truth. Some days later, he received another report that an enemy soldier was standing in plain sight of one of the hills opposite. He found him in his scope, as plain as if he were standing 100 yards away. He simply said to himself, "I'm not going to do it." The next second, his commanding officer was yelling, "I order you to fire!" And of course he said, "Yes, sir." And he adjusted his gun and fired to miss the man. That night, he agonized over how he would respond the next day when he had a meeting with his commander. He asked himself, was he being simply immature? Was he avoiding life's most difficult requirements? Did he lack courage? And what about his convictions to the UN troops? All these attempts at reasoning, these questions and doubts churned in his mind all night long. But in the end, only one thought remained. I'm not going to kill anyone again. So when that moment of truth came the next day, his fate was decided. In 2 weeks, he was transferred out of his unit. But years and years later, the soldier told Minister Marshall that he had always been proud of his act. He felt like he was finding out who he was for the first time. So perhaps you have had a time in your life when a nagging doubt or agonizing conflict pulls you in two ways at the same time, and questions like, which way should I go? What is the right thing to do? I think we've all had moments like this. And sometimes the answers come from unexpected directions, like a random comment from a stranger or a dream. Not a dream that answers the question necessarily, but that one that points in the direction of wholeness or seems to affirm the directions that you're already leaning toward, the direction you're already taking. Or whereas Mary Oliver strolls through fields thinking of ultimate questions, maybe you spend time along the river or in our beautiful mountains, and the answer comes to you through the simplicity of gaining perspective. The hugeness of the landscape frames the questions into a manageable size, and you can walk away with a new strength and resolve. Mary Oliver says she doesn't know exactly what a prayer is, but she does know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down into the grass, how to be idle and blessed, and how to stroll through the fields. A holy curiosity deserves a response that is reverent. To be silent is to be wakeful and receptive to answers. Bended knees are not generally part of our particular style and religious tradition. Only in a few New England UU churches will you even find kneeling benches or kneeling rails. But there are a few questions that warrant kneeling down in the grass, or next to your bed, or any place you may find yourself at those times. When the questions matter enough and the answers don't come, then humility can bring us to reach for wisdom, strength, and insight beyond our usual capabilities. Humility before ultimate questions isn't a fitting posture, is a very fitting posture. I would hope that our UU religious practices would always be characterized by openness and a measure of humility. Religion responds to ultimate questions through parables, through worship, and through rituals. They respond with the words of sacred texts, as well as with doctrinal statements. One of the most universal ways that religions have found to respond to ultimate questions is through storytelling. Stories help us make sense of our lives. They give form and meaning and direction to the events of our days. Theologian John Shea said, "No matter our mood, in reverie or expectations, panic or peace, we can be found stringing together incidences and unfolding episodes. We turn our pain into narrative so we can bear it. We turn our ecstasy into narrative so we can prolong it. We tell our stories to live." The parables of Jesus, the Jataka tales, which tell the lives of Buddha, the ancient stories of the Talmud, the legends of Shiva and the many deities of Hinduism, or the legends of Native American traditions, they all attempt to order reality and make some sense of our place in it. When we meet a stranger on a plane ride and tell our story, we are answering ultimate questions about who we are and what matters to us most, what we need and want out of life. A story may seem messy, a messy way to answer a question, but then life is messy. True, it lacks doctrine, scripture, or one unifying story. It offers no definitive answers, but that can be one of the values of being a Unitarian Universalist. It resists all attempts to form it into equations and formulas. The challenge is to affirm our existence while in the midst of those loose ends and those ambiguities, to invest in partial answers until better ones come along, and to be patient and trusting that we will live into the answers. Our closing hymn is 354, "We Laugh, We Cry," and we have a video to share from the First Unitarian Church of Baltimore.
We need to feel there's something here
So we would like to thank Jessica for our music and our closing words. We will continue with the Reverend Linda Whittenberg. She says, "May we never give up on a holy curiosity. May we never stop asking ourselves and each other questions like the one Mary Oliver puts. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? May we never fail to respond to the questions that arise out of the great mystery that has been given to us to contemplate. The great mystery, ongoing, never ceasing, ever pouring itself into new vessels, ever recreating itself again and again." We will now extinguish our chalice, and you will please, if you are invited to, share the recitation with me. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. So we will have our coffee hour directly after the service, and hopefully many of you will show up for the picnic in about an hour. It's time for our postlude. Be safe and be well, everyone.